Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining in what is our third session where we've kind of kickstarted things again for Azure Thames Valley. So thank you all for joining again, and welcome as you start just jumping in here. I can see we've got a few new faces, a few returning faces. So again, welcome everyone, and looking forward to having you with us all this evening. So similar agenda to what we've done in previous events here. We're just going to spend the next kind of 10-15 minutes or so just with some introductions, just reminders about the community and some of the things that have been going on. And then I'll hand over to Alicia, who will take a few updates for us this evening. And then I think Josip will do some of the introductions and some of the later parts, handing over to our guest of honor, Sarah, this evening. So without further ado, we'll just move on here fairly swiftly. So you'll know recently we had the Cloud Skills Challenge, so thank you to everyone who took part. I think we had about 25 or 30 people going through that who were eligibles. Other people who took part didn't quite meet the bar for the prizes, unfortunately, but maybe there'll be another one in the future, who knows. Not everything's a competition, but it is, we know it is. So congratulations to the folks who won. So Dean Jones, first prize, got the Surface Go 2 with a keyboard, so awesome prize there. Matthew Bradley, second prize there, Surface Headphones 2, which I'm wearing and modelling right now, and they are very lovely. They're not his, they're mine. And Chris Wright, who got third place there with the Bit Plush toys. So again, congratulations to those folks, and thank you for the participation in that. And it was great to see so many people getting involved. And with that, I just want to add one quick reminder here, actually, that some people are aware of, some people maybe don't know. The platform that you used for the Cloud Skills Challenge is Microsoft Learn, and it's been around for about 3 years or so now. And what I find actually when I'm speaking with people is that a lot of people don't realize that it exists, that it's there, and it actually has so much content which is all free. And some of it is, all the way from the what is cloud fundamentals, all the way to the nuts and bolts of how do I configure this service and this particular aspect. So whereas Docs and Azure Architecture Center and Cloud Adoption Framework and all these things are more reference-based and kind of taking you through scenarios, this is all about education, learning, and mapping it back to the certifications as well. So if you did know about it, take another look at it, because there's more than likely more content than the last time you looked. If you didn't know about it, take a look, because there's loads of great content that you didn't know about until we just talked about it. So lots of stuff to go and look at there on Microsoft Learn. Not just Azure, there's Microsoft 365, there's GitHub stuff, there's Dynamics. So the whole suite of different products and services you can look at there. So go ahead, take a look at that. With that, I believe, Alicia, I hand the baton over to yourself there.
Thank you, Chris. So hello and a very warm welcome, everybody, to Azure Thames Valley Meetup. My name is Alicia Dillon, and I'm the Community Marketing Executive at SquaredUp, and along with Chris and Josip, one of the organizers for Azure Thames Valley Meetup. So this slide is just to tell you that we're really looking forward to getting some more awesome talks lined up for you throughout this year. So if you are willing to present something to the community, or if you happen to know a good speaker who would be, please submit your session via our Sessionize page. I will share that link in the Teams chat a little bit later on. We also really want to continue to grow our community. So if you happen to know any Thames Valley locals who would be interested in joining our group, then please share our website, the meetup page, our Twitter, LinkedIn details with them. Again, I'll share that all in the chat a bit later on. And if you know any local businesses who may want to support us, please point them in our direction. We'd love to have a chat with them. I think that's it. If you could skip to the next slide, please. And since we were talking about virtual events, I wanted to use this opportunity to plug Squared Up Live, which is our first ever user conference. It's taking place next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, the 27th and the 28th of April. We have a jam-packed schedule for both days. Richard Benwell, who's our founder and CEO, is going to be doing the keynote speech talking about his vision for unified IT observability. We also have a senior director from Gartner who's going to be talking about how observability, AI ops, and business insights are changing the meaning of IT monitoring. We're also really excited to give you some launch details for our latest release, which is Squared Up version 5.1. And you'll also get to see an exclusive preview of our eagerly anticipated cloud product, which we're really excited about. We're also going to have some product training sessions on some dashboard topics, and there'll also be some one-to-one support sessions with our engineers available. And if that isn't enough to tempt you, you could also stand a chance to win an awesome Star Wars Lego set worth $800 if you enter the dashboards competition. I will share the link to that landing page with you, and we'll announce the winner at Squared Up Live next week. Thank you. That's all from me. I'll now hand over to Josip, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you.
Oh, hello. Hi. So there's not much to say there, but we're very, very happy to have Sarah joining us. Sarah is a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft and IT veteran with a wealth of experience across the board. One that attracted my attention was the Scotch whiskey, but we can talk about that later. And I promise I'm not going to do more that jokes about the hybrid meetups, but in actually I'm going to let Sarah talk about the Azure hybrid Azure management and what that is. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. Let me pull up my presentation here. Teams is on a go slow tonight. So yeah, I actually, to touch on that point where you said, I actually did work for a Scottish whisky company a few years ago. Very good. The perks were very good. I've definitely missed some of the perks that you got. Microsoft shares are amazing at Microsoft, but you know, Scottish whisky is also amazing. So absolutely. So hopefully the slide deck has loaded. Tonight we're going to be talking about hybrid cloud management and how you can think about moving your solutions to Azure and managing that split solution, because, well, as I'm going to be talking about later on, we're in a hybrid solution where a lot of people are moving towards the cloud and they're starting to figure out how to operate in this new hybrid environment and what tools are available to make your life a lot easier. For those that don't know me, my name is Sarah Lean. I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. I have been in the IT industry for 14 or more years now. Is my slide actually loading? Because it's not loading on my side. It's okay. Chris is giving me the
all good. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, so I have been in the IT industry for well over 14 years, and as I just mentioned, I did work for various different companies inside their IT department, and also worked for my managed service providers. I am in the infrastructure side of things, so that's where I tackle a lot of things, and that's where I'll be tackling the kind of talk tonight. So it's definitely not a developer talk, so sorry, Chris. I know you're in that developer space, but hopefully you'll enjoy tonight's session. And if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm happy to take questions throughout the session, but there'll also be time at the end of the session as well. So please do make this interactive and not let me talk for ages and ages and ages. So, as I said, IT environments are moving and they are evolving. You know, the traditional infrastructure or traditional data centers that we might all be used to are definitely a thing of the past in certain industries and certain organizations. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of customers are still hosting their own workloads in their data centers, but they're looking to evolve that and looking to grow with the cloud solutions that we have, and even just modernize some of their solutions as well. So moving away from traditional servers and looking at things like containerizing their work applications, although containers, that's a whole other technology that a lot of people are thinking about. But we are diversifying in our technology. It's not just looking at those traditional servers. You know, we have IoT kits and stuff like that. If my colleague Anthony was here tonight, he'd love to talk about IoT. And then we're obviously talking about the cloud as well. Now, I'm going to be focusing on Azure, but a lot of organizations are looking at that multi-cloud strategy. They're looking at diversifying their workloads across these cloud platforms. So looking at a bit of Azure, looking at a bit of AWS, or potentially even the GCP cloud. And that might be part of their strategy. They might actually be intentionally going down that multi-cloud route, but then potentially there's also a lot of customers I've seen who have ended up in this multi-cloud space because people have went off and done their own thing. They've been, blocked by wanting to move to the cloud. So instead of actually going through the proper processes, they've got a credit card, they've spun up a subscription somewhere, and they're running production workloads in there. And then once, the IT department actually clock on to the fact that some of these departments are doing it, they have to claw that back. But it isn't a simple process. So I want to talk about how we try and manage all of this, depending on where your infrastructure is and what you've got. So the first thing I want to talk about, and one of my favorite tools, is the Windows Admin Center. Now, it might feel a bit weird talking about Windows potentially in a hybrid solution or a modernization solution, but let's face it, we run a lot of servers still in our environments, and it's still very much a core workload for a lot of organizations. Now, what Windows Admin Center allows you to do is try and orchestrate and try and manage those Windows servers across the board, regardless of where they are and what they are. So it could be a physical Windows server located in your own data center, a virtual one, or one living in Azure or another cloud provider's environment. As long as Windows Admin Center can actually access this system through the various ports that the documentation outlines, then you can actually use Windows Admin Center to do some of those tasks. Now, it's not just the Windows things that you can use within here as well. Windows Admin Center has a lot of Azure capabilities as well, and we'll be seeing that throughout the demo tonight. Now, in terms of the server management, it is actually reinventing how you actually work with your servers, because in the days when I used to manage multiple servers, I had thousands of MMC snap-in windows open, I had RDP sessions open, I had various different, open source tools that helped me connect into servers, and even at times I had different laptops open connecting in via VPNs and stuff like that. It was horrendous. It was horrible. I was forever running up and down to data centers and managing this. But Windows Admin Center can actually start to streamline some of that tasks. It can start to manage those individual tasks that you use all the time. But as I said, it's not just about the tasks within the Windows Server itself. It actually extends some of your capabilities up into Azure. So from Windows Admin Center, you can enable Azure Backup. You can put Azure Backup onto that Windows Server that could be living on-prem and start to manage it through this Windows Admin Center. Now, I hate the phrase one-stop shop or one management plane or that single pane of glass, but that's really what it does, because let's face it, none of us want to be opening up multiple tabs, getting confused where things are, closing down a tab we were working in because we're trying to close down the other one. Windows Admin Center helps us manage all of that. It means we can do it all in one place. We can do our management operations from that one place. Now, we have a lot of partner integrations within Windows Admin Center as well. So things like Data On, Dell, HP, they all have management packs or add-ons for Windows Admin Center. So if you're still running hardware in your environment and you want to manage that tasks, maybe it be updating firmware or checking log files for the actual hardware, there's integration within Windows Admin Center for this as well. And again, it's that one single pane of glass that you don't have to have another console open for. You don't have to maybe run to your data center and actually log in at the actual physical console for your server. You can start to manage it all from Windows Admin Center. Now, Windows Admin Center is a single download. It's a very small download, less than 60 meg, and you can install it at no additional cost. If you have a Windows Server license within your environment, you're entitled to run Windows Admin Center. So if you've never used Windows Admin Center before, please do use it. We are launching it within the Azure portal. It is part of a preview service, so it's now built into the Azure portal to manage your Windows Admin Center, your Windows servers from in there. So the possibilities are really endless in terms of doing this. I want to take you through a demo, so let me fire up the demo. I am cheating tonight. I'm going to claim it here. These are video demos because the bits that I'm going to show you took a while to set up, and no one wants to sit here and watch while things install and things load. So I've kind of cheated and used a video, so apologies for that, but I'm claiming it right up here front. Now this is the Windows Admin Center console, and you can see I have a few servers that have been set up. I've got an Azure server, and I've also got a physical server. I've even added in my Windows 10 PC to manage that as well, although I don't really do much with that. It was just to show you the possibilities. When you launch into a server, what it does is actually connects up and gives you all of this information down the left-hand side and an overview. So quite easily you can see here that this is a server running 2019. It's not got a lot of memory, not got a lot of cores because I was running it on-prem. You can see the performance though, you get basic metrics that you might want if you're trying to log in to a server. Now down the left hand side you have all the possibilities that you may want. So the event log, if you're trying to troubleshoot something, you can look in there. You don't have to log on to the server, you don't have to go to your monitoring console or check through your email system to try and find that alert that can potentially be the one that you're trying to find the issue to. You've got your firewall settings. So again, maybe don't want to be changing too many settings within your firewall often, but again, you have that flexibility to use that. You can go in and see what's turned on, see what's turned off, enable rules, disable rules. There's lots of flexibility here, and it's just like what you would see within your Windows server. It's not anything different. It's all the same settings that you would see if you were natively logging in to that Windows server. And you can see here, I'm trying to enable some of the file sharing TCP, or sorry, ICMP firewall ports that you might want. Probably not a good idea to be opening this potentially, but you can see that you can do this. You can interact with these firewall rules and start to troubleshoot things from there as well. We can see installed apps. We could run some PowerShell on this server. We can hack the registry. Again, maybe we shouldn't be doing that, but the possibilities are there if you want it. You can see there's a lot of options within the Windows Admin Center. You don't have to log into the server. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour of how you can start to manage your Windows servers a little bit better using Windows Admin Center. Now, if we think about the hybrid picture, we're thinking about how do we manage all of these servers and how do we manage all the different possibilities that we could potentially have. Like I said, people are starting to modernize. They might be looking at actually replacing their data center, potentially with something like Azure Stack, or extending their capabilities with IoT, or again, using these cloud platforms other than Azure. How do you keep all of that together? How do you keep that so that it's all within the governance package that you want, so that your naming convention is all the same, so that you know what's there? If someone asks you how many servers you have or how many devices you have across your network, where do you have to go to do that? Do you have to open up different browsers across the piece and start to count manually of all the servers that you have, all the devices that you have? No, this is where we bring in Azure Arc. Now, Azure Arc can extend your Azure management, and it can extend the capabilities of Azure to somewhere other than Azure. So potentially onto your on-prem environment or into other cloud environments. You can gain visibility of what's happening within your servers, and you can keep that compliance, like I said, in check. So naming conventions, you can keep things that are secure. So your security profile that you need across the board, you can have ports open, ports closed, things like this can be all done from Azure. With Azure Arc, and this is the capability that we're kind of going down the route. Now, it's not just servers, like I said, it can be IoT devices, it could be Kubernetes clusters, it could be data services. There is a plethora of options out there with Azure Arc. With Azure Arc enabled servers, again, we can start to control them though. We can start to look at things like role-based operations. We can control who can log on to our servers, who can't log on to our servers, that built-in governance and security services. Again, like I was saying earlier on, if you have to do an inventory of all your devices, then again, Azure Arc can help you do that. When you look at Azure Arc's capabilities, there's an option there. So this slide deck, and I won't read it all out, gives you the option of installing an agent onto all of these type of devices. So your virtual machines, your typical servers, Kubernetes, SQL, PostgreSQL, there's lots there for you as well. So the capabilities are extending across all of the types of devices and solutions that you're trying to implement in your environment. With Azure Arc, one of the big questions lots of people ask is, how much does it cost? Is this going to cost me extra to actually run in my environment? And what we're seeing is no additional cost for running Azure Arc. It's really just those additional services that you can start to pay for. So if we build out this slide, there's no additional cost for running Azure Arc. When you start to enable some of the Azure Arc services, that's when you actually start to pay some money. The additional services are for things like Azure Policy, Azure Monitor, backups, log analytics, etc. So this is where you would potentially expect to pay though, right? The Azure Arc is just a management plane that enables you to help bring these services down onto your on-prem environment or into another cloud provider's environment. But you still have to pay for them, right? You don't pay for that Azure Arc agent. You pay for things like the backup storage that you're using, for the actual security information that's being stored, say in Azure Sentinel, things like that. So those costs are still there with Azure Arc, but you don't pay for the management plane. Hopefully that makes sense. I think it does. If we have a look at how you actually onboard a server into Azure Arc, I'm going to show you the story through the Windows Admin Center again, show you the possibilities of using Azure Windows Admin Center and why it is such a powerful tool. Now we've got our servers again, and what we want to do is go into the server and start to kick off the agent install into this server. Now down the side, you'll see a blade called Azure Hybrid Services. If we click in here, it gives us a bunch of options. So we could be enabling Azure Site Recovery or Azure Monitor. The last one we want to do is Azure Arc. So what we do is we get started doing this and tell it what subscription we want to put this resource into. And this is where we want to store the metadata of that server. So I pick my subscription, I pick the resource group, and I pick a region. Again, is just to store the metadata of this service so that we can then see it inside Azure. What Windows Admin Center does here is installs that agent for you. It kicks off that install, and eventually, once we give it a few minutes and refresh it, it will say that this server is connected into Azure. And if we go into the Azure portal, we can actually see it here. So you can see the same information that you would expect any normal Azure server to be there with. But one key thing to note here is the icon is different. So you've got that little purple icon instead with an Azure Arc enabled server versus the kind of blue icon that you're used to with an Azure virtual machine. But you can now see that server, and we're seeing it in the Azure environment, and that's where we can start to extend the capabilities. We can start to put in tagging so that if you use tags to identify your workloads and associate them maybe with a department, with someone who's created them, however you might be using tags, you can start to build that in and start to have that reporting feature as well. But again, the capabilities are constantly being added with Azure Arc. I think later on I'll actually show you a demo with Azure Policy and how you can set policies down to your Azure servers, your non-Azure servers, sorry, through Azure Arc. But again, the possibilities are endless now that that server's been surfaced up within the Azure portal for us to see and manage like any other server within Azure. I think, is that a question down there in the comments there? I'm not
No,
I'm
someone
not
was having issues with
Oh, is it the
their
slides
screen.
or?
Yeah, but I
Yeah, okay,
think it was a local issue.
okay. uh, awesome. So the other challenge that we see a lot of people having with is maintaining the patching. So we've all had to probably sit up at 2 a.m. in the morning and patch a server for our organization. I know I've had tons of those evenings. And that's something that people are conscious of now. I think previously they weren't necessarily always conscious of, or it was something that they put off and maybe did every quarter. But now people are looking to do it because of the security risks that not patching your servers can actually mean for your organization. And if you have a diverse platform of servers that are Windows, that are Linux, that are spread across multiple clouds, that are spread across various different data centers, it can be really hard to maintain that. It can be really hard to report on the compliance without, again, having multiple reports that have to be spun out. And again, how do you centralize this? How do you make it easier to maintain that security profile that your organization needs to do? And this is where Azure Update Management actually comes into play. Now, Azure Update Management is, I think, a little known service that a lot of people dismiss and don't really understand or don't really use. Azure.
I think you
We've
may have
lost
gone
you,
on mute,
Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah, somebody muted me there.
Oh,
Yeah, so Azure Update Management can actually help you with this compliance. It is, like I said, one of those services that not a lot of people, I think, understand or realize is actually there, but it can really help you centralize that management of patching your Windows and your Linux virtual machines, regardless of where they are. So it can deploy those updates. You can schedule those updates so you don't have to be there at 2 a.m. in the morning if you want to apply the updates. We can do some very cool things with this. It's part of the Azure Automation service, so it allows us to actually schedule the updates, like I said, and we can start to maybe apply a bit of scripting to the service before it actually patches. So how many times you've patched a service and you need to stop a bunch of services before you actually apply the patches? You then have to reboot the server, then you have to start up the server again, you have to start those services and then check if everything's okay. If you can script any of that testing and that stopping and starting of services, you can build it into your Azure Update Management. So when you are deploying those patches, you can run a pre and post script to help you do that. So again, it doesn't matter where these servers are, it can actually patch them for you. And again, Windows and Linux servers, it can patch them for you as well. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize about Azure Update Management is it's actually a free service. You can use it and it doesn't cost you anything. There is some cost when you start to store the log data of the patching. So the log data is all currently stored within Log Analytics. If you start to store that out with of the free period, out with of the free tier within Log Analytics, that's when you start to pay, but you're not paying for the servers that you're patching. So you could be patching 6,000 servers and storing logs for, I think the free tier in Log Analytics is 30 days and so many gigs. If you're staying within that, you can be doing your patching free of charge. A lot of organizations want to have the compliance data, though, to show auditors that they've been patching and they've been patching regularly, and that's potentially where the costs will come in. But if you've ever used Log Analytics, you'll know yourself that it's a very cheap service to run if you're very frugal about the data that you're actually putting into it. So, great service. I use it. I have a home lab. I have some servers that I spin up every now and again to do demos and try things out with. They're always out of date because they're never on and I never patch them. Azure Update Management will actually patch them if I leave them on long enough for me, and it doesn't cost me a thing to do that. So I don't have to sit there and apply 60 odd updates or reboot those servers several times to get the updates. Azure Update Management all does it for me, so it's made my life a lot easier. I actually had the chance to speak to one of the product team a few weeks ago, I think it was now. VG and I spoke about Azure Update Management in an episode of Azure Unblogged. We talked a lot about the product. He went into some depth about how you can do various different things. If you scroll to the very end, he has kindly talked about the private preview that is currently going on, and mentions how you can get involved with the product roadmap and where it's going. So definitely check that episode out. You can scroll all the way to the end to try and find out about the roadmap feature, but it is definitely something very cool that's coming into play with Azure Update Management. And again, it's a cool service, it's free, so definitely have a look at it, even if it's just for your home lab environments and managing maybe even your parents' virtual machines or their PCs and stuff like that. It can do that as well. Now, something people talk about when they talk about hybrid is the networking capabilities. Now, before you all get excited, I'm not going to be talking about ExpressRoute or any of the VPN capabilities because, let's face it, there's so many configurations and so many different things with ExpressRoute. I could be here all night just talking about ExpressRoute. I actually wanted to talk about some of the load balancing and traffic management systems that we have within Azure because I think a lot of people forget that these are there to help you with your migrations and can be used to help you traffic manage or load balance your platforms across various different clouds or across your different data centers. So the first one I want to talk about is Application Gateway. Now, Application Gateway is a load balancer that takes the packet from the end user, terminates the connection, then does something else, then creates a new connection, and then can pass it on based on your routing. And this unlocks a lot of scenarios. So if you want to do a redirect, if you want to do URL rewrites, you want to do header changes, there's tons of options there for using Application Gateway. It's also got auto scaling built into it, so you can start to manage how the traffic's happening. So if you're getting hit all the time by traffic suddenly and you weren't aware of it, it will scale up to the maximum amount of nodes that you said when you set up the application. And then once that traffic dissipates, it will go back down to wherever it needs to go in order to handle the current traffic. This can actually deal with back-end pools. So when you look at the load balancer, it talks about back-end pools or endpoints that you're directing your traffic to. Application Gateway can support virtual machine scale sets, Azure Kubernetes services, so AKS. It can do cloud services, which is legacy web services, and it can also deal with on-premise services or a public IP address, which means that you can use it across a hybrid environment. And a lot of people use this potentially for a migration project. And you'll see some of the other examples that I'm talking about as well can be used for migration projects. But if you're starting to move your traffic or move your workloads away from, say, a traditional server on premise and you may be using a web app instead, you can start to move that and you can start to spin up one in Azure. You can have the on-premise one still working and start to drain the traffic across, and people don't necessarily notice it. How many times have we maybe done one in the past where we've moved our website from one location to another? We've had to wait on DNS changing, we've had to wait on something spinning up, or the caching purging itself. If you start to put some of these load balancers in place, you can actually start to do that migration without anybody actually noticing what you're doing. And that can be a positive thing, right? Now, the other one that we have is Traffic Manager. Traffic Manager is slightly different from Application Gateway. What it does is takes that request, that DNS request, someone puts in, say, www.quintoso.com, it will translate it via a CNAME to the Traffic Manager and then load balance again across the different endpoints that you have. And again, it can be non-Azure endpoints. So the same scenario I just talked about, where you can actually start to move your services across to the cloud without your end users noticing, is the same scenario. I think a lot of people forget about this and they don't think about how they can migrate services maybe with no downtime, with zero downtime. And that's why I wanted to mention some of these services. Now, the last one I want to mention is Azure Front Door. Azure Front Door is pretty awesome. I've been learning about it this week, and the capabilities that it has is just phenomenal from a security point of view, with the web application firewall, with the SSL offloading that it can do, the CDN capabilities that it has. And again, it can actually point to on-prem or resources that don't live in Azure. So another scenario that if you're migrating, you can use this in front of it and actually start to think about how to move your traffic without anybody else noticing. Or even potentially from a disaster recovery point of view, if you aren't, secure in the fact that the Azure is a good service and is going to be reliable and provide you with, I think it's what 99.999% service across the board, then you could have other services in other cloud providers, or you could have your own infrastructure on-prem, and again have Front Door start to look at how to redirect some of that traffic for you as well, and just use the capabilities. So it might sound a bit weird me talking about an application gateway and a traffic manager and Azure Front Door in a hybrid scenario, but I think these are good capabilities to flag up if you are thinking about a migration project and how they can actually help you with those migrations and try and make them seamless from your end user point of view as well. And it helps you to get more involved with Azure as well. So you get to learn new services and you get to play with cooler and newer technology. In terms of security, we are aware of that. Like I said, it's something that a lot of organizations are massively aware of every day. And there's a lot of exposure that our environments have, whether that be someone writing their password down and, having an unsecure password, to someone potentially leaving port 3389 open on your virtual machines. There's lots of access and lots of exposure points of view that you have to think about. And once someone gets into your network, there's a chance that if you haven't designed it properly or they're just malicious enough, they will get through all of your environment and make it very sticky for you across the board. And this is where I think people have to think about in terms of how they want to do their security. Lots of customers I talk to are moving to the cloud because Microsoft Azure has invested in a lot of security products. I think, on screen you'll see we've invested over £1 billion or $1 billion, sorry, a year into cybersecurity. We have thousands of security experts that not only look at the traffic that is happening for us, but for our customers as well, and looking at designing the solutions and making them much better for everybody. So there's a reason that a lot of customers are choosing this, because they want to offload some of that burden and use the capabilities and the intelligence that Microsoft have developed around security. I'm hearing weird feedback. Is that just me or?
No. Can everyone make sure they're on mute, please? Just in case. Thanks.
Just in case. Sorry. I wasn't sure if it was noise in my background.
No, I thought it was me as well. I wasn't sure.
So as I was talking about, we have various different products or points of attack that you want to think about with Azure security and security across the board. We have points of protection across the board when you look at identity, your network, your data security, various different threat and security managements and stuff like that as well. So there should be something that can help you and can plug into the solutions that you're looking at. Now, Azure Security Center is the big product that we talk about. It's there to help with your infrastructure security and your management. It isn't, again, just for Azure products. It can be extended to your on-prem environment. And you can use this as well. We can see it with Azure Arc. If we look back to how we can extend it, we can enable it quite easily for Azure Arc servers and onboard those servers automatically and have all the automations there. Azure Security Center is really powerful. I actually do love it in helping me to make sure that my environments are secure. I actually received an email just before I came into this presentation about the fact that some of the web apps that I'd spun up for a demo earlier this week had HTTP open. I thought I'd disabled that, but that email confirmed that I hadn't done that and I had to go and do that. So it's just those little flag reminders that if you're maybe not installing things, if you've not automated things, I naughtily used the Azure portal and just went through the wizards that way. So of course I missed some steps in making sure my app was secure. But if you're not doing that, or if you're maybe missing it, we're all human, and there are chances that you're going to miss a step in the documentation, or you're going to miss a step that someone distracts you, your dog comes in your office or whatever, and you forget to do that step. That's where Azure Security Center can really help you. It can help you alert to those things and help you be proactive and not wait until someone finds that accidentally and starts to, do something malicious within your environment. Now, I'm not a security expert. I know enough to be dangerous, which is ironic given the security space. But I love the Secure Score feature within Azure Security Center because it quickly tells me how good or bad I am within my environment. The higher the score, the better that you are. Now, if you've got a secure score that's really low, then there's something that you need to action. And for me, as a non-security expert, that's a great indicator of where I need to spend some time within my environment. Hopefully, a lot of organisations will have security experts and you won't necessarily need to rely on the Secure Score feature, but it's there as a great guider. It's a gateway, or it's a great point of view where you can say at the start of your project that your secure score is only sitting at 50, and by the end of the project you want to aim towards getting to 100%. That's a good metric and it's a good goal for you to work towards for an organisation. But it doesn't just give you that score. It's not just that score metric that you get. You get lots of information about how to address the security vulnerabilities and how if you address them, you'll get a better score. Some of the actions will also tell you how to fix it. So there's a little button on some of the recommendations that say fix it now. You click on that and it goes and fixes it. So it could be that your port 3389 is open on a virtual machine. It will go and close that port for you. So really easy, really simple, dead effective to use within your environment. So again, Azure Security Center can be used within your Azure environment and your non-Azure servers as well. So a great security plane for everything within your environment. We have MultiCloud Visibility as well. So if you are running multi-cloud, you can start to pull in some of the alerts. So in GCP, you can pull in the alerts from the command center that they have, or in AWS, you can pull the alerts in from the security hub. You can't do anything at the moment with the alerts from the other cloud providers. It's only the Azure ones that you can auto remediate from at the moment. But again, it gives you that single pane of glass rather than having, well, we're not in an office anymore, but in a lot of offices that I used to work in, there was a TV screen on the wall with the security dashboard, right? And I'm sure we've all worked in similar scenarios. The last thing you want is 3 big tellies on the screen with you constantly having to look at. From the cost of actually having 3 TVs in your environment is going to be a lot of money for someone. If you can pull all of those alerts into one of the command centers, then you can actually start to, only need one TV or have one screen showing those alerts, and then you can action them as they come in. So again, a great service there from the Azure Security Center. Now, this is a good slide I found that actually builds out how the Azure Security Center works and where it can plug into. I'm not going to read it out. At the end of this session, what I'm going to do is give you a link where you can go and actually download the slide deck. So if you want to have a play with this, you want to read it and watch where all the arrows go, then you can absolutely do that. But I wanted to show it and include it into the deck because I actually think it's quite interesting when you trace through how Azure Security Center works and where it can plug into. I've talked enough about Azure Security Center, so let's dive into a demo of what it is and some of the features and give you a look at what I've talked about. So you saw there, I had the secure score, which wasn't very great, I don't think, so we'll bypass that. But what I can start to look at here is the inventory of my servers. I can see if they're being monitored, if they're not being monitored. So I can see that instantly there's some servers here that aren't being monitored at all by Azure Security Center, which isn't a great thing. I can also see some of the recommendations that I need for these servers. Again, there's my really bad secure score. But it's giving you lots of information, and it's really clear information about what's happening in your environment. It's giving you that power and that decision making information. If you've been asked to improve your security score, or you've been um, asked to have a look at your security posture across the board, this is a great place to have a start at. You can understand that there's people not encrypting all of their virtual machines, and if that's something they should be doing, you maybe need to look at a different process. You maybe need to go and hit some people. Maybe not hit some people, that's not great. That's the Scottishness coming out in me there. But you need to have that conversation, and you can show them the information. You can say you aren't doing this, and you've tagged this, and you've created it, and things like that. And you need to be much better at what you're doing to make sure that the environment is secure. So there's information here. If you are also looking at compliance, those regulatory compliance things like PCI or ISO, it gives you guidance around this. This isn't great. This environment I'm using to demo isn't very compliant with the PCI environment, so I'd definitely fail an audit if someone came in and walked through this. But it shows you again where you can action this. So if you've never had to implement a PCI environment before and you've been asked to, you can have a look in the Azure Security Center and see where to start. You can see where you can actually make some difference and what you have to do to your environment. So hopefully that sounds good. Definitely don't go and hit people. That's such a really bad thing to say. You're gonna have to edit that out the recording, Chris. Oh,
As you say,
anyway.
the Scottish coming out.
I know, you can tell I'm from Scotland, right? Now, as I said, one of the things you want to make sure is you've got good governance within your environment, right? I am a stickler for having naming conventions. I hate it when people go off and do their own things. That's just one example of governance, like I was showing you in that security center environment. If you have to comply with PCI, I'm sure there's tons of things that you have to do to meet that audit thing. So you want to have that governance in place to help people maintain that posture, to make sure that when the auditors come round that you are actually complying with the PCI environment, and people don't have to go and read 6,000 pages of documentation to understand how they can deploy a server and make that PCI compliant. And this is where we can start to implement things like Azure policy. Now, a lot of people get angry about governance and they hate to use it because they think it's going to be stopping them from doing what they want, and they don't have management's ruling them. But it's not about that. It's about making sure that you can go ahead and do your job without actually breaching any of the policies that you need to. I used to be, like I said, a stickler for naming conventions. I used to make people rip down servers because they'd named it wrong, and I wouldn't let it live in the environment. I would just be horrendous about that because they hadn't read the updated documentation. Maybe they were reading a version from 6 months ago when I had a different naming convention. That stops this. With you start to implement policies, it means that if someone goes to deploy something that's out with of that current naming convention, they'll get told instantly that it's out with of that naming convention, for example, and then they can try and change it, and they can start to adjust it rather than go through all the process of deploying that resource and then finding out that it's actually non-compliant with the naming convention and they have to start again. No one wants to waste time doing that. I'm sure my colleagues hated me when I used to have to do it in the past. But these are the kind of things that you want to do. Even just deploying the same time zone for your servers so that we're all using, I'm going to be really uninclusive here and say GMT time instead of UTC. But if you have that in your environment, you want consistency within your environment, then Azure Policy can help you do that. It can help you put those guardrails in place so that if you have someone in your organization that does not like reading documentation, then they can just go off, deploy the resources, and be safe that they're still being compliant because Azure Policy is guiding them down the right route. Some of the common guardrails, like I was saying, it could be naming conventions, it could be talking about tagging. So if you want tags on your environment, allowed locations, that's a big one. I think is it 50? We're nearly at 65, I think, Azure regions, or potentially more than that last time I saw a slide. So that's a lot of regions and that's a lot of possibilities, and that's great for lots of organizations. But if you are an organization who works in an industry that has to only keep the data of your customers, say here in the UK, that can be a bit tricky for you, especially if someone accidentally types in US East or something, or pick something from the Azure portal accidentally, and then they're deploying something accidentally to the region. And that's just a big no-no for a lot of organizations. So the allowed locations policy will allow you to, again, help people avoid those mistakes, those accidental mistakes that we're all human and we're all able to actually do. Other things like cost. I don't know about you, but I have actually spun up really large virtual machines, went off, had my dinner, went to bed, got up the next morning and got the email from the boss saying, "What have you done? Like, why have you done that?" No one wants to have to deal with that. No one wants to have to, spin up something really large and find out they've wasted the budget for the month or the year. Yes, I have had customers that have wasted their budget for the year with some massive deployments. Again, putting in those policies that maybe stop people from accidentally using those big ones means that there's a process in place to help your organization potentially save money just by doing that. It's not about stopping people doing that. Absolutely, if there's a need for people to deploy those virtual machines, then you can allow them. They'll have to come and ask maybe the management to undo that policy or make an exclusion or make an exception. But it's making sure that you don't accidentally type in the wrong number, scroll down the wrong thing in the Azure portal, and blow everybody's budget for the whole year. So there's lots there to think about in terms of common guardrails, and I love the fact that we have that in place. Where we see it starting to link in with Azure Arc and maybe our servers that are not on-prem or not in Azure, sorry, is the guest config policies, where we can actually start to configure some of the in virtual machine settings. So like I said, if you want to put your virtual machines all in the same time zone, if you want to make sure that, I'm trying to look down here, that you're auditing things that need a reboot, if you make sure that your administrator group is all containing the same people and isn't containing random people that you've just added in occasionally. There's settings that you can apply there, and this is where we can start to bring it back down on-prem and start to look at how we can use Azure Policy to configure to a certain degree our virtual machines that don't live in Azure. And we can also combine it with things like DSS configuration, and Chef as well as one of the tools that we can use to try and configure it. But again, it's all trying to interconnect the products that you have and all these diverse environments, again, that you have as well. Now, going forward to our Azure Stack portfolio, and again, I could probably talk at length about our Azure Stack portfolio, but we have a few services when we think about Azure Stack. So we've got Azure Stack Edge, which is our kind of edge device. It sits at the edge of your environment. It's that place where you can send all of your data for your IoT devices and do some compute before the data is getting sent somewhere else. You've got Azure Stack Hub, which is probably the original Azure Stack. I think it was already, when it came out first, it was called Azure Stack. It's now called Azure Stack Hub. That in itself is a, I don't want to say a replacement for your on-premise data center or on-premise servers, but a lot of people see it like that. So if you're trying to upgrade your servers, you could use Azure Stack. It will give you the capabilities that you have with Azure, a very similar interface. So when you log in, it will look like the Azure portal, and it gives you that flexibility. We see a lot of customers use this for disconnected scenarios. So submarines have this installed, oil rigs, cruise ships, although I don't think cruise ships are going anywhere any days. But those are the kind of things that you maybe see Azure Stack Hub being used for. Now, Azure Stack HCI is our newest appliance here, and that's the one I kind of want to talk about a little bit. Azure Stack HCI is a kind of replacement for your servers. Again, probably the marketing department are going to hate me for saying that. But if you're looking to modernize some of your servers, you can start to look at Azure Stack HCI to replace it, because it is built on technology that you know. So it's combining things like Windows Server, Windows Admin Center, and building that on OEM hardware. So it all comes bundled together. You don't have to sit and read about documentation about what I need in order to install Azure Stack HCI on my hardware. It comes pre-built, so it's OEM hardware. You'll order it from a partner like Dell or HP, and it will just become something you rack into your environment. It does allow some of the technologies that you're familiar with as well, with Azure, to be there as well. It doesn't have things built into it that we all hate within our Hyper-V servers, like Windows Server Fax. We don't need fax machine services on our Hyper-V servers, and that's where it starts to differentiate from the normal Windows Server operating system. It doesn't have those components that you don't expect it to have. So it'll have things like your Hyper-V, your storage, it will have storage spaces direct installed on it, but you can't enable the fax server. No idea why you would want to enable the fax server anymore, but that feature isn't there for you within Azure Stack HCI. But it's the same as Windows Server without those silly bits of components that you don't need for your Hyper-V server. Again, Chris, you're going to have to edit this because the marketing department are going to hate me completely. But Azure Stack HCI is that kind of pre-built server that you can use within your environment, and it's starting to connect with Azure through Azure Admin Center, through Azure Arc. You can start to look at backups, disaster recovery, all up into the cloud with Azure. So it's an exciting service. So definitely have a look. Again, I probably could do a presentation on it alone, but just to give you a flavour of some of the things that are hybrid. What I haven't mentioned though that is hybrid are things like we've got Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery, Azure Monitor, Azure File Sync. Even Azure Active Directory is a hybrid tool that's been around for years and we probably all are familiar with. But hopefully tonight you've been given a bit of flavour of not only my personality and my weirdness, but also Azure Hybrids and some of the tools that can help you on your journey as you go down that cloud adoption route. As I said, if you want to download the presentation, head over to this URL. There's also a bunch of links that might tell you a bit more about these products than I have tonight, but there's lots of learning resources there. Thank you so much for putting up with me tonight. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please do ask.
Thank you, Sarah.
Round of applause first, I think.
Absolutely. Round of applause. Thank you, Sarah. That was absolutely amazing presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed your presentation as much as I have. It's nice to see the level of Microsoft investment in hybrid scenarios as well there. As you said, I hope there's going to be a lot of questions across the room. So I'll open the panel if anyone's got any questions.
Maybe I'll kick one off to get everyone warmed up and started if everyone's being shy. Do you kind of see any typical, I don't want to say paths or steps, but almost, this is where commonly you see people getting started, of all of those different technologies that you were talking about there, Sarah? Are there certain ones that come up in different scenarios, for example?
I think everybody's different, to be honest, how they start off. Chris, some people will start with, say, their web application, so their websites. So the websites will be groaning with the kind of traffic. They might be legacy applications. The developers are crying out to use something that is maybe a bit more modern than currently being provided to them. And that could be the first flurry into actually using that. Other people are using it because their servers are potentially legacy. We've probably all been there when the hardware can't even get parts off of eBay for, and the Windows Server operating system is absolutely definitely not supported anymore, and it's becoming a massive security risk and an audit issue as well. So it depends. There's different viewpoints. I think those are maybe the two key ones that a lot of people start to use, especially the website one. It can be frictionless, and you don't have to think about potentially things like ExpressRoute and VPN, because your website could maybe sit in a silo in a web app and a SQL database or some kind of database on its own, and it can live there without you actually thinking about, oh, how do I do identity? How do I do ExpressRoute connectivity? How do I secure it? How do I get through some of the loops of taking stuff there? So yeah, there's that option. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Yes. Thank you. We've got a question in the chat here, so I'll say it just for the recording. With the Azure Update Manager, is that a common / good way for people to move away from using SCCM to patch their servers?
So you can actually use SCCM, or is it called MECM nowadays, with Azure Update Management. There is actually an integration between the two of them, so you can use them in conjunction. I don't see a lot of people doing that, if I'm truly honest, because it adds a little complexity of having those two tools try to update your servers. Um, I, it depends what you're using SCCM for. SCCM is much more obviously than a patch tool, and I'd love to think that you weren't just using it as a patch tool, to be honest. If you were just using WSUS, that Windows Server Update System, is that right? Service? Something like that. WSUS server, I would say absolutely have maybe a look at using Azure Update Management as a replacement technology. But again, we have integration with WSUS as well. So there's lots of nuances around what Azure Update Management can do. I wouldn't necessarily move it as such away from SCCM, because you're really giving yourself a tool that does all the other things that SCCM does, and then another tool that just does update management. So it's definitely a bigger piece to the puzzle there in terms of what direction you're actually trying to go down. I don't know if that answers the question. Probably not answered the question. I'm on a roll tonight.
It reminds me of our live stream the other week and how how much fun we had there, Sarah.
No, I'm a riot.
Can I ask a quick one from me? I'm new to this because I'm a desktop person. I use SCCM for device management, so I'm not really into this kind of thing. But I really, I'm trying to get myself more familiar with the Azure side. So Stack, how does feature parity work? You might have mentioned it because I joined late because I was putting the kids to bed. But how does feature parity work with the stuff around, Azure is constantly changing, constantly updating, constant releases. If you've got something like an oil rig having an offline version of Azure, how does that work? Which features are available to the offline Azure stack?
That's a really loaded question. If Chris
Sorry.
is in Chris, no, sorry, it's a constantly moving one. It's one that you probably would have to refer to the website to actually give you the proper answer and the cadence. I think the stack expert Chris Black is actually in the chat, so if that's the same Chris that I'm talking about, and he might actually be better placed to answer that question, because he talks about Azure Stack all the time. But yes, there is a risk. Obviously, that at some point with Azure Stack, you have to put it back online in order to update it and get the feature parity and things like that. And I think you do get notified, and we do give you warnings about you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. So there is a case for, although it can be disconnected, at some point you have to reconnect it. But yeah, you'll have to do that. Sorry, I don't have the specific answer.
That's all right. It shows just how green I am to that. I didn't even realise that was a difficult question. So apologies for that.
No,
That's
it's okay.
Genuinely no idea that
Yes,
was
as Sarah is saying, it is a very difficult question and a loaded question, and it changes versus when you do it disconnected or connected, how you want to deploy it, and all of those things. It could fill out the whole presentation in of itself just to answer that question, probably,
right.
and probably
I'll
a
retract.
few more.
I'll retract the question.
But no, if you
I
want to have a chat about it at some point after this or whatever, reach out and I can
Great.
point you in some documentation or just literally have a call with you to explain, because it is a difficult beast, and even just looking at the docs, you won't have the full picture. But if you just talk to someone, it's probably easy to do that way.
Fine. Great. Thank you very much.
I'll be in shy tonight.
Yeah, I was going to say, any more? I can see Josip came off mute.
That doesn't mean I have any questions.
I'm always mean with that. I'm always watching for people coming off mute and say.
Just encourage everyone else to ask questions.
Someone has raised their hand there, actually. Did you want to come off mute there, Simon Raj?
Hi. Yeah. So my question is specific about the patch management thing, and regards to the cost management as well. So in terms of patching, so we have these on-prem distribution points and Azure-based CMG. And we have the Intune as well to manage the cloud clients over the cloud. So in terms of cost, which one would be the better option to choose? CMG for the roaming clients without using the VPN bandwidth, or utilizing the Intune tool itself?
So one thing I should probably have pointed out, actually, when I talked about Azure Update Management, is it's server-based. It doesn't patch your Windows 10, your Windows 7, your client devices. That's where things like Intune and other products will be better. Azure Update Management is purely for servers. So I don't know if that changes the question or completely answers it and makes it invalid. But yeah, that's one thing. It's not a client device. It's not for that. It's more for your servers and your server environment.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's actually my side. I'd agree with Mike in the chat there. So that's you would keep that away from CMG. You don't do updates via the CMG, because those updates are already hosted in the cloud. They're already in the content delivery network within Microsoft. Hosting those update files in your CMG is just wasting bandwidth. So unless you can really unless you really need to, just try and keep on the CDN. Use Intune to do update for business through the CDN.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Any more for any more? Going once, twice, sold. Don't know who to, but sold. Awesome, Sarah. I don't know. This is what happens when we get us Welsh and Scottish together, isn't it? The Celts. Awesome, thank you, Sarah. I think, as someone said in the chat, they're very impressive presentation. So thank you very much for joining us, and really pleased to have you with us tonight. So thank you again, Sarah, for joining.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you, Sarah.
So let me just bring the screen share back up, and then I think Josip, it's back over to you.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you. So, Sarah, thanks again for fantastic presentation. And then going forward in the next month, we will be having Horace Jr., who is also IT veteran, currently working at Microsoft, and he's also had the experience with the Oracle and other large organization. And his area of expertise is the blockchain. And he would be delivering presentation introduction to blockchain, and also particularly blockchain use on Azure, which would certainly be very, very interesting presentation. Thank you. And the next one. So, as I say, thank you so much. We will be hanging around, so there's still time to socialize and exchange any questions or experience you've got. I know it's never going to be as it would be in person, but hey, let's make the most of what we've got at the moment. Hopefully not for not too long, before we're back in a room with the beer and pizza. On the same sort of vein, we are always on the lookout for the great speakers, like we got Sarah or whoever's. So if you've always had that bug that you want to be presenter or you want to share something, do register your interest on the Sessionize, or just get back to Alicia, Chris, or myself, and we will be very, very happy to have you as a speaker. And then just a sort of a early warning, as Chris put together, nothing to be worried about, actually something to be excited. In September, we're going to change the sort of the way we present the meetup. Instead of having a one big presentation, we will be focusing on a number of lightning talks, which will get shorter, but hopefully cover much broader range of topics. And again, as I said earlier, if you don't feel confident, or if you don't feel like you've got a material for the big presentation, perhaps you have one for lightning talk. Or even if you have ideas, what would you like to hear in a lightning talk? Even if you're not going to be presenter, we will be very, very keen to sort of get your opinion, so we can really tailor the content to your needs. So we need you.
So I guess then that leaves it up to everyone else now. We've done our job. Now everyone can start talking, socializing, and networking. So I will stop the recording here.